Wow, I tell you what, Manchester, you were never going to disappoint, were you? But seriously, I just want to say, I normally start when I do a talk by milking a local connection, however tenuous. An aunt's second cousin's dog once went through the city, for example. But the reason I was so excited to come back here, we've been, as Sam said, we've been in Newcastle, been in Nottingham, absolutely bat meeting. But this is the area I grew up in. In fact, just down the road in Stockport, just next to Edgeley Park. I was thinking we could start with a 1 minute silence for Stockport County, actually. Close to the road. I've got friends I grew up with. You'll hear them heckling shortly. Seriously, friends, one of the things I want to start by saying is to Maria, how humbled I am to share a platform with you. And I'll tell you why. What's happened since this government has come to power is they have tried to airbrush out of existence the reality of what is being inflicting on our communities, the voices like yourself, which are so rarely heard. And there's one thing this movement can do, is to give a platform to people like you to tell the truth about what is happening to our country. And that is what you have done so beautifully. Say too, the reason we've got such a big turnout here, it's not just down to the organisers, though actually in fact we can give a big cheers for what the organisers have done. It's not just that, it's the anger that exists out there, it's the desperation for something else. Do you know what the biggest party in this country is? It's not Labour, it's not the Tories, it's not the Lib Dems. It's the yelling at the TV every time George Osborne appears. Party, and I know it's a pretty damn big party, I'll be honest with you. But what you've all done today is you made a decision that you don't just want to be part of that party yelling, screaming at the television and the radio. You want to get together with people like you, people who, other than the people at the top, are all in this together, to coin a phrase. You actually want to fight back. And that's what this is about. And what it's about is asking, what sort of country do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a country where the only industry booming are food banks, which trebled in size last year? Well, the thing is this, when they came to power, they smeared all of us as deficit deniers. And yet, everything we warned about has come to pass. Not that we can take any joy from that, given the absolute destruction being inflicted on communities across the country. The underlying deficit's going up. It's estimated they'll spend £200 billion more than they predicted. And as for growth, well, I don't know if people remember that Labour mocked up this poster before the last election. It was of David Cameron as Gene Hunt from Life on Mars, smugly perching on an Audi Quattro, and it said this: "Don't let him bring us back to the 1980s. How wrong they were. This was a far worse economic crisis than the 80s. It is longer than the 1970s. Friends, it is longer than the Great Depression of the 1930s. This is now the longest economic crisis in modern times. Everything we warned about has come to pass. But I'll tell you this is what makes me more angry about this government almost than anything, and I understand that's a pretty sizable claim to make. But it is the fact this government has tried to redirect people's entirely justifiable anger away from the people at the top who caused this crisis to people's neighbours down the streets. Non-disabled people against disabled people, private sector workers against public sector workers, people who already live here against immigrants. If you're a low-paid worker, your pay packet's been cut in real terms by your boss. The Tories are cutting your tax credits. Who do they get you to hate? The scrounger down the road. If you're someone in the private sector, where pensions have been systematically stripped for more than a decade, who do they get you to hate? The nurse next door who still has an intact pension. If If you're struggling to make ends meet, full stop, who do they want you to turn your fire against? The immigrant getting benefits which don't even exist. And each time, it's the same argument. You've been mugged by us, saying less deserving neighbours should be mugged as well. It is the politics of divide and rule. And that is where that's where we come in. Because I have to say, having done, hundreds of meetings over the last 2 years, it's one thing I've found. There's no shortage of anger out there. There's no shortage of fear. But there's one thing that's been missing, and that's hope. And it was Harvey Milk, a crusading civil rights campaign in the United States in the 1970s, who said this: "I know you cannot live on hope alone, but without it, life is not worth living." And the point is this: it doesn't matter how angry people get, it doesn't matter how scared people get, without hope, people don't fight back. They yell at their television sets. Their anger is directed against their neighbours, but they don't have the confidence to fight back. And that is where this comes in. What this has to do, above all else, is to give people out there who are crying out for answers, who know their kids are going to be poorer than them for the first time since World War II, to give them hope. And these are some of the things I want to talk about, how we can give people hope. What we need is a coherent alternative to what is happening. Because what's been drummed into people's head from day one is there is no alternative. I want to talk about them quickly now. Now they say this: welfare spending's too high. I'm going to shock you now. It might surprise you, but they've got a point. It's not to do with a bunch of lazy scroungers dribbling on sofas all day in mansions made out of widescreen television sets watching Jeremy Kyle on loop. It's for three reasons. It's a housing crisis, it's a wages crisis, and it's a jobs crisis. Now, taxpayers have every right to be furious about the £23 billion currently being wasted on housing benefit. But friends, that money's not lining the pockets of tenants. It's lining the pockets of greedy landlords charging extortionate rent. Because they know. They know you and I, the taxpayer, will step in and subsidise those rents. So instead, we should both control our rents, but let councils build housing, creating jobs, stimulating the economy, bringing down the housing benefit bill, and also bringing down the 5 million strong social housing waiting list too. Tax credits. Now friends, tax credits are a lifeline for millions of people in this country. But let's be clear about what they are. They're a subsidy for low pay because bosses aren't paying their workers properly. We have a living wage. We won't be spending billions of pounds on tax credits, on housing benefit, because 93% of new claimants of housing benefit are people in work whose low pay doesn't cover the extortionate rents. And again, the unemployment crisis, billions being spent because of people who simply can't get work. Let's have an industrial strategy where we create hundreds of thousands of renewable energy jobs, as they've done in Germany, taking on the environmental crisis and taking on the jobs crisis too. Friends, the banks, which we bailed out, at the end of the day, the reality is this: we nationalise the debts, but we privatise the profits. We, the taxpayer, who bailed them out, we don't have control over what those banks do. They're still paying bonuses, they're not lending. So we should instead have public control over the banks that we, the people, bail out. And friends, again, we hear about benefit fraud day in, day out. And I'll be honest, it does exist. According to the government's own figures, less than 1% of social security spending is lost to fraud. It's £1.2 billion a year. Compare that to tax avoidance by the people at the top, £25 billion every single year. I'll give you one example. Sir Philip Green. Now, Sir Philip Green, who owns Topman and Topshop and other stores, He's registered his company under his wife's name in Monaco, so he doesn't have to pay any taxes. Now, he wasn't slammed by the Prime Minister like Jimmy Carr for being morally deviant or whatever it was. He was appointed as an advisor on how to cut our public services. Friends, we need an all-out war against tax avoidance and also demand that the people at the top pay far higher taxes than they have. Friends, these are common sense ideas. They're not wacky, they're not mad. And actually, if you look at the polls, the ideas that are entirely supported by the majority of the British people. And by making these points confidently and loudly, with the eloquence which Maria did before, we can give people hope. And that is what the People's Assembly is going to do. Already what it's done is bring together unions representing millions of private and public sector workers standing together. It's brought together people in the Greens, the Labour Party, activists fighting for disabled people, for young people, people fighting for tax justice, and also, and crucially this, people who just have no political home, but want to fight back and fight for a different sort of country. And I'll be honest, this is what's so important. And this is why I was so heartened by, I know, the fantastic discussions you had on the open mic before. Because people realised we can't afford to fall out with each other anymore over tiny differences. Too much is at stake. Too much is at stake when people who have nothing to do with this crisis are being made to pay for it, when people are struggling to make ends meet, when sick and disabled people are having their benefits taken away. We'll always not agree on every dot and comma, but we have one common fight, and that is what the People's Assembly will do right across the country. It won't just be a bunch of people blabbering away in London. It's going to be a grassroots movement in every single town and city in this country. And above all else, what should also give us confidence is this. This government has no mandate for what it is doing. I actually remember... the Tories won a general election in this country, just about, because it was 1992, I was 7 years old. I remember it because my Stockport teachers came dressed in black. But friends, the last election, handed to them on a plate, biggest economic crisis since the 30s. A Labour government which at the time, if we're going to be honest, was slightly less popular than cholera. And yet, they still only got 36% of the vote. They couldn't win. And their weakness is our strength. We can build up a campaign which can unite all these people, the All In It Together coalition, if you like, all those people being made to pay for this crisis. We can inspire people. We can give people that hope, a vision of a different Britain. And over the coming months, hope all of us, we're not just going to go home now, we're not just going to pat ourselves on the back, but we're going to get together, have a permanent group here that can link everybody together, coordinate actions, have one genuine fight back, a broad church of all those who want to fight back. And friends, I always end with this, because I believe it more than anything else, that if we stand together, we fight together, we will win this together. Thank you.